It's the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC, live from the green space today. Good morning, everyone. And when we are doing the show live in the green space, you can watch the Brian Lehrer Show as well as listen. So if you choose, you can go to WNYC.org or go to the WNYC Facebook page or Twitter feed, and you can get live streaming video of the Brian Lehrer Show in the green space today. So most of you by now have heard sound bites from that strange and unusual televised confrontation yesterday between Donald Trump, Chuck Schumer, and Nancy Pelosi, right? In fact, based on the sound bites and stories that are out there, you might think it was just Schumer, Pelosi, and Trump in the room. Unfair fight, 2 against 1. But actually, it wasn't. It was the 2 Democratic congressional leaders, plus the president, and the vice president, Mike Pence. He was also there. Here is what Vice President Pence sounded like during that rapid-fire exchange. And later. And when it was really getting hot. That's right, he didn't say one word. On television last night, commentators were throwing their generational references. Rachel Maddow said Pence was like Mr. Roboto. That's a Styx song from the 80s. Baby boomer Jonathan Alter on MSNBC said Pence was like Lurch from the Addams Family. In the Times today, they said he was like a throw pillow. That's a reference. At first I thought, well, grandmother's couch, but no, really, that's a reference for all ages. I'll just say he looked like he was waiting for a bus or a canceled New Jersey Transit train. No, that would be pacing and guffawing and cursing. But I wonder what he was thinking. Did he not want to upstage the president, not take the president's side on shutting down the government over a border wall, or just keeping his powder dry for a clean start, just in case? It's Pelosi who's getting most of the love in the press today for yesterday's SmackDown. It was for exchanges like this.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity to meet with you so that we can work together in a bipartisan way to meet the needs of the American people. I think the American people recognize that we must keep government open, that a shutdown is not worth anything, and that you should not have a Trump shutdown. You have the White House, the Trump shutdown. You have the White House. You have the Senate. You have the House of Representatives. You have the votes. You should pass it right now.
No, we don't have the votes, Nancy, because...
And it was for exchanges like this.
You know, Nancy's in a situation where it's not easy for her to talk right now, and I understand that, and I fully understand that. We're going to have a good discussion, and we're going to see what happens. But we have to have border security.
Mr. President, please don't characterize the strength that I bring to this meeting as the leader of the House Democrats who just won a big victory.
Elections have consequences, Mr. President.
Let me just...
So, the New York Times, you can applaud for the theater if you want. We could take a poll of who you're applauding for, but I think we won't. The New York Times today says, for those who study women in politics, it was a notable moment. We rarely get to see a woman in that level of leadership confronted in that way, said Debbie Walsh, the director of the Center for American Women in Politics at Rutgers. I think this was an example that really speaks to women's capacity to lead and to do it civilly, to do it with grace, and to be a strong leader. They add that, according to one Democratic aide in the room and a House Democrats meeting later, Pelosi questioned Mr. Trump's manhood, calling the wall debate a manhood thing for him. She also primly likened the meeting to, quote, a tinkle contest with a skunk, adding, I was trying to be the mom. But the Times also notes that many of the newly elected Democrats whose support she needs to be elected Speaker next month come from districts won by Mr. Trump, and she is walking a fine line in antagonizing him. While she's being cheered on the Democratic left, the article says centrists may react more warily, knowing that their voters sent them to Washington to compromise more than fight. Our first guests in the green space today are 3 members of that historic group of Americans, Democrats from our area who won congressional elections last month to take seats in the House of Representatives that had been held by Republicans. Here are some stats before we meet the 3. about that incoming Democratic caucus in the House of Representatives. If you don't know the big picture, 66 new House Democrats, 43 of them took Republican seats. More than half are women, and a third are people of color. House Democrats will also include more military veterans than any time in more than 20 years, and 2 of those are on the stage with us. So let's meet Max Rose, who won in New York's 11th Congressional District. That's all of Staten Island. Was that applause for Max Rose or for Staten Island? Plus a little of Brooklyn, including all our parts of Bay Ridge, Bath Beach, Dyker Heights, Gravesend, Sheepshead Bay, and Bensonhurst, neighborhoods near the Verrazano Bridge, with 2 Z's, please. Donald Trump won Staten Island by 17 points over Hillary Clinton. That's a larger percentage than he won Texas by. Also with us, Mikie Sherrill, who won in New Jersey's 11th Congressional District. That's parts of Morris, Essex, Sussex, and Passaic counties. Trump won this district, too, by about a point in 2016. It's Morristown, Wayne, Wanacue, Lake Hopatcong, the Ramapo Hills. And Tom Malinowski is here. He won in New Jersey's 7th district. Defeating incumbent Leonard Lance. That's all of Hunterdon County and parts of Essex, Morris, Somerset, Union, and Warren counties, a spread out district. It's like from Westfield, pretty close to the city, out to the west to the Pennsylvania line. Hillary Clinton won that district, but by only about a point. Welcome, all of you, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
You all came on for campaign interviews, so now we can get to know you more outside the context of binary political combat. Welcome back to WNYC. And since none of your districts are around the corner, thanks so much for trekking to the green space today. We really appreciate the effort that this took for all of you. And only one of you supports Pelosi for Speaker, I know, at least as of last check. And we'll get to that to see if yesterday changed anything. But I don't want to make this all about that. So let's start more generally. Max Rose, you won a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star for war injuries in Afghanistan. I know people hear in theory about roadside bomb attacks and they gasp. Here, folks, as a New Yorker who got wounded in one. I see you're still a captain in the National Guard, but the Times also called you a cerebral history major at Wesleyan. Those don't go together very much in today's America. How did they wind up going together for you?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. My mother's here, and I got to tell you, for the last week, it wasn't my son just got elected to Congress. It's my son's going to be on the Brian Laird Show. So this is phenomenal.
Mom, you got to get your priorities straight.
Look, I don't see a contradiction there at all. And while 2 of us are veterans on the stage, all of us are public servants who have served abroad. And in the 21st century, as we consider these incredibly complex threats, that's what matters. Now, coming from Wes and being a New Yorker, it was deeply instilled in me this sense that you have to serve. And I chose a form of that public service, there's no doubt, and we all continue to. But I think that there's an incredibly strong commonality amongst all public servants, which is that you cannot afford just to bicker. You cannot afford to just think about social media or just think about your own self-interest. You've got to do something to accomplish the proverbial mission. And that's what we're hoping to bring to Washington, D.C., God forbid. So irrespective, right? So, I see no difference in between, putting on the nation's uniform and now having another uniform on and continuing the fight.
Mikie Sherrill, you went to the Naval Academy in the 90s, I see, and spent almost 10 years on active duty, Navy helicopter pilot, and other things. And you have a master's in global history from the London School of Economics. And you went to law school at Georgetown and served as an assistant U.S. attorney for New Jersey. And I see you and your husband are raising 4 kids in Montclair, ages 6 through 12. So you're ready for anything. How did your cerebral side and interest in the military come together?
Well, my grandfather was a pilot in World War II, and I always wanted to follow in his footsteps, so that was certainly a drive for me. But in wanting to serve my country, I also was very interested in the institutions of our democracy. I think that we're seeing now Congress is just not the strong branch of government that we need it to be in this country. It's one of the reasons I'm running. I think it's one of the reasons that we all want to see. I'm not running.
It must go. How long was the campaign? Like from the time?
The campaign was forever. The campaign was decades. So we're making the transition. I will be sworn in January 3rd. So it's one of the reasons I ran. And I think the reason that we all want to see great bipartisan legislation passed.
And Tom Malinowski, let me start here with you. You're an immigrant. Tell people where you were born and how you wound up coming to this country and to New Jersey.
Well, thank you, Brian. Yes, indeed. I was born in Poland back in the days when it was a communist country. Came to America, to New Jersey, when I was 6 years old, and took the oath of citizenship when I was 11. And always remembered that oath to support and defend the Constitution I took when I was 11 years old. It's the same oath we're going to take on January 3rd, the same oath we've all actually taken at various points in our career. And it was a big part of my childhood, the consciousness that I came from a dictatorship, a place where we don't have the freedoms and liberties and institutions that we take for granted at our peril in the United States, and the belief that I should dedicate at least some of my life to trying to defend them.
And most of your career has been in human rights work of one kind or another. Your bio on Twitter reads, diplomat, father, former Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, Congressman-elect in New Jersey's 7th District. Did your origins in a communist country inform your interest in human rights? All right.
It might have had something to do with it, yes. I see your point there, Brian. But yeah, you know, I do have a little bit of experience doing combat with dictators in other countries. And that experience might prove relevant.
And Max Rose, you also worked on criminal justice reform. I see when you worked in the Brooklyn DA's office under the late Ken Thompson. I think that work was really interesting. Can you describe it briefly?
Absolutely. And we now refer to him as the late, great Ken Thompson, Brooklyn's first African-American DA. And Ken, no, please. And, you know, Ken ran a race and unseated a 20-year incumbent, Democratic incumbent. Nobody thought that he could win. And when he ran, he spoke about establishing a fair and just criminal justice system. One of the things that he ran on was building out a conviction review unit. And then after he won, he actually did it. You know, and everyone said, Ken, you're crazy for doing this because you're going to let somebody out of prison and then you're going to get Willie Horton. And what's fascinating is Ken took this risk, right? Over 20 men are now freed from prison from crimes they did not commit. Their lives irrevocably changed for the better. But more importantly, since Ken's passing, establishing a conviction review unit has become the baseline for any district attorney who wants to assert that they are progressive or democratic. That's how quickly we can change politics in this country if we actually show courage, if we actually show integrity. You know, his legacy is incredibly important to me. And I think showing that type of courage and integrity as we pursue, whether it's social justice initiatives or a myriad of other initiatives that actually will help people in Congress, I think we have to remember that sentiment.
You know, I think most policies that we associate with mass incarceration are at the state and local level. Most kids from Brooklyn who wind up at Rikers or wherever aren't committing federal crimes. That's why, you know, part of why the Ken Thompson conviction review is so significant. What can Congress do to reduce mass incarceration? Because now you're going there.
Well, actually, there's tremendous bipartisan legislation in front of the Senate right now People always talk about, how vets can get along, but I do want to take this opportunity to call out my fellow vet, Tom Cotton, for obstructing that, which I think is...
Conservative Republican from Arkansas.
Which is absolutely disastrous, because we can't just put criminal justice reform in a silo, because it is certainly a matter of justice, but it's also a matter of public safety, and it's also a matter of fiscal sanity here. If you are for keeping cops safe, if you are for spending our public money effectively, then I think you do have to be for this type of common sense criminal justice reform, where we can look at the fact that, close to over 70% of ex-offenders end up recidivating. That doesn't make any sense. We have to provide people with the resources that they can actually be successful citizens in a flourishing economy.
And Mikie Sherrill, same question for you, since you were an assistant U.S. attorney in New Jersey. How do you look at the issue of criminal justice reform and what can be done at the federal level to have an impact in the state, in your district, as you go to D.C.?
Well, I think criminal justice reform is one of the key things that we need to do to advance civil rights in this country. While I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office, I helped to start the first federal prisoner reentry court in New Jersey, helping people coming out of federal prison successfully reenter their communities. And at the federal level, which is where I have most of my experience, we can do sentencing guidelines reform, which I think that's being discussed right now in the Senate. When I'm saying that we really need to see Congress working better, part of that comes from my background in criminal justice, with the idea that the Koch brothers and the ACLU agree on the bill that we need to get through Congress, and we haven't been able to pass that. And we've been working on that for years. And I think something that's so critical when we see the House of Representatives, as we move into the next year becoming a Democratic House, we see how that's impacting legislation throughout both the House and the Senate, because the Senate's had 2 years really to take up this bill, and they just haven't done it. And so to now see that they're getting, I think, some pressure, I think we'll see some good things.
They're pretty close. I know in the Senate the rules are such that an individual senator like Tom Cotton can go a long way to holding up a bill. But I think even Trump supports that criminal justice reform bill, and if it comes to a vote, it's likely to pass and get signed into law, right?
I think that's right. It's had wide bipartisan support. In fact, I know my own Senator Cory Booker's been working on that for years, and it should pass if it gets a vote.
Tom Malinowski, you served, I see, on President Clinton's National Security Council, and for Obama, you were in the role of Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor. That's a pretty broad category. Tying to the conversation we were just having, I see you tweeted yesterday, Trump is saying that America uses our criminal justice system to take hostages in political negotiations, thus legitimizing China and others doing the same. This endangers every American who does business abroad. You want to make the segue to that issue?
Sure. I was referring to President Trump's comments yesterday about the arrest of this Chinese executive, the Huawei executive, who was detained at our request by the Canadian authorities. It's a complicated case, and I'm not going to comment on the merits of that prosecution, potentially. But what the president said was that he might be willing to release her if the Chinese make concessions in trade negotiations. And I got to tell you, I've dealt with the Chinese and with the Russians and others as a diplomat, and we have always labored to persuade them that the United States has the rule of law, that our criminal justice system is not politicized, that when we arrest somebody, it's because we think they've committed a crime. And for the president to suggest, to imply what all the haters of America believe, which is that we're hypocrites, that we don't actually stand by those principles, that we're willing to arrest somebody and then trade them in a trade negotiation, is, number one, wrong. It hurts our reputation. Number two, yes, it does send a signal to the Chinese, the Russians, and everyone else that, yeah, they can do the same thing. Americans abroad, tourists, travelers, business people, yeah, you can arrest them too and hold them hostage to try to get something from us. It's incredibly irresponsible, and it comes back to why we're all here. We have a responsibility to form a Congress that checks that kind of behavior. By the way, on your Twitter bio that I mentioned, it reads,
diplomat, father, former Assistant Secretary of State, etc. Why'd you put diplomat first?
I don't remember.
Oh, maybe an aide did
They're
it.
both very important. Well, you have to be a diplomat to be a good parent, I think, sometimes.
That's right. Depends on your parenting style, right? Listeners, who wants to ask a question of these three incoming members of Congress? 212-433-WNYC, 212-433-9692. Max Rose from New York, Mikie Sherrill and Tom Malinowski from New Jersey, 212-433-9692. And first priority to folks who live in their districts, but anyone may call. What do you want to ask about the experience so far of these incoming freshman Democrats to be? And we'll have others who are elected from our area on the show in the coming weeks. We're honored to have these three in the green space today. For now, it's Max Rose, Mikie Sherrill, and Tom Malinowski. Your calls at 212-433-WNYC, 212-433-9692. And here in the green space, just raise your hands, and we will come around with microphones. So, Mr. Rose and Ms. Sherrill, you were among 16 House Democrats who signed a letter last month calling for the party to change the status quo, that's a quote, and vowing a vote for new leadership in next year's Congress, meaning, I guess, not Nancy Pelosi. How come, Mikie Sherrill?
Well, I didn't sign that letter.
I'm
but
sorry.
I
I
did.
read that you did. I'm sorry.
Well, no, but I did make a commitment to the district that I would be advocating for new leadership and would not be supporting Nancy Pelosi. And I did that because, I really do think we need to move forward in new and innovative ways. I think we have a tough road ahead of us to create the good bipartisan legislation that we need. And I think, given that, it's time to move forward in a new way.
Well, Max Rose, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm shocked you're asking this question. No journalist has been wanted to talk to me about this. I
will note that we went 21 minutes before bringing it up.
I do find it fascinating that after I ran for 15 months saying that I was not a supporter of Leader Pelosi, that now there's somehow even this minor expectation that I would change my mind. But I do want to frame this issue in a larger context, because I think all of us ran on the idea of not just winning the campaign, but changing politics irrevocably in this country for the better. And there are really three prongs to that. One is a change of leadership, certainly. The other is the need for far more bipartisanship in this country, moving us away from this era of absolute hyperpartisanship and vitriol. And then the third prong, though, is getting the incredibly toxic and corroding nature of money in our politics out of the system. The fact that federal lobbyists and corporate PACs are literally buying off politicians on both sides of the aisle, and they've been doing it for multiple generations here. So certainly at one point or another, we are going to move beyond this question of who's going to be the leader and who's not. But if you think that signifies the end of us trying to change politics in this country, it absolutely does not.
Tom Malinowski, why are you for Nancy Pelosi for Speaker?
During the campaign, I said I would support a speaker who would help me deliver for New Jersey on issues like building the Gateway Tunnel and trying to get back our state and local tax deductions. And I had extensive conversations with, I think, soon-to-be Speaker Pelosi on those issues, and she made the commitments that I needed. More broadly, I think we're in a really dangerous moment in our country's political history. Our institutions, our values are under attack. We have a very fragile foothold and a narrow window of opportunity in the House of Representatives to try to restore people's faith that that institution can work in the face of that assault. We have to get legislation passed to get things done. I think Nancy Pelosi has shown us that she is a leader who knows how to do that. And I think the last thing we need on January 3rd is to start a drawn-out, uncertain leadership fight in the Democratic Party, when what we need to do is to start getting bills passed.
Let's take a phone call. Let's take a phone call on this. Richard on Staten Island on line 2 in Max Rose's district. Richard, you're on WNYC. Hi.
Hi, good morning. I voted for Max, and I'm glad I voted for Max. But
So am I.
I remember a get-together that was held by retirees of the UFT, and Max was confronted with a question from a lady who said, why do you, in a debate with Donovan, bash Nancy Pelosi? Okay? And what Max said was, basically, he wasn't really bashing her. He was talking about this new leadership that he was just describing. Now, that's all well and good. And having, and I also asked him a question, too. He probably remembers me. But anyway.
I do. I'm going to knock on your door this evening.
No. Listen, Max, I voted for you, and I'm glad I did. And I told you that I would vote for you, not because you're not Dan Donovan, but because I believe in you. I think you're a good guy. But I think these attacks by good people like Max on good people like Pelosi and de Blasio hurt us. We give our enemies ammo. But one big point that the other congressman said, which I think is so true, we are not really dealing with regular Republicans. This is not Mitt Romney. This is not even George W. Bush. This is an out-and-out fascist. And to talk about, oh, my district is electing us to be bipartisan, absolutely not. I haven't met a Democrat who voted who said, I want people to be nice to each other again. They want to confront this guy.
Richard,
And, she's capable of that.
And she's capable of that, he said. Go ahead,
Yeah, so
Mr.
So
Rose.
first of all, thank you for calling in, and thank you, of course, for your support. I absolutely reject the idea that I have any enemies in this political process. I reject that idea, and that's not good for this country. I ran on the premise of a very basic, simple story that in 2013, when my vehicle hit an improvised explosive device in Afghanistan, my life was saved. More importantly, the lives of the soldiers I was with, who I love and was entrusted with leading, their lives were saved as well by the armor underneath my vehicle. The only reason why we got that armor was because of a simple and small and unreported act of bipartisanship. That was once the story of this country, and I sincerely believe that it can be the story of this country yet again. It was no surprise. You know, I ran not just attacking my opponent, Dan Donovan, not just attacking the state of our politics, but also I did criticize Mayor de Blasio for acting like Staten Island does not exist, for ignoring Staten Island. You know what that was? That was an argument that I think we need a ferry on the South Shore. That was an argument that I think it is despicable that Staten Islanders have to commute for 90 minutes each way. Despicable that we have incredible health disparities on Staten Island and no public hospital.
But let me jump in. As it pertains to Pelosi, are you saying that she is too partisan, since you're talking about bipartisanship, is she too partisan compared to whatever Speaker of the House elected by the Democratic caucus who you would like to see? And is it that she's too far left?
No. The point that I'm making, and I don't want to speak for Mikey, but I think many of us who were made this point throughout our campaigns, is the point is that we need a wholesale change in the very nature of our politics in this country, and our leadership is part. Let me finish here. Is part and parcel for that. Now I know that you and the media often likes to try to buttonhole folks. Is that, are you far too left? Are you moderate? Are you not? Part of the argument that I was making, in essence, was that when we had the keys to the castle the last time, we weren't bold enough. We didn't pass the Employee Free Choice Act. We saw a public option yanked out of our health care bill. We still, to this day, a hedge fund manager pays a lower tax rate than the cops and the firemen and the teachers who call my district home.
But I'm trying to get you to a specific. On Nancy Pelosi is to what? To get your vote?
No. And the point is that I am exactly trying to push back on this point here. So when we talk about a change in leadership, again, it is not a question of Nancy Pelosi is to this or to that. The question is what is the potential of our politics in this country, and how important is it to see a wholesale change in our leadership to achieve that? So we can keep on going back and forth here, and I don't think it will get us anywhere towards the point.
Mikie Sherrill, same question.
So I think what a lot of us were concerned about after the 2016 elections is that the Democratic Party was not connecting with our voters, that voters in post-industrial towns were not feeling like the Democratic Party was their party. My grandfather was a member of the United Auto Workers. Being a member of a union brought our family into the middle class. And so to see the type of people that my grandfather represented, to think that in some way the Democratic Party was not representing them was really upsetting to me. The people that I knew that we were fighting for and that we had been fighting for my entire lifetime and generations back did not feel that connection, I thought was a real problem. So I ran, and from the start, people were saying to me, Mikie, the Democratic Party has a problem. They're not connecting with voters. And I said, I get it. I get it. And so I went around my district and I listened to people for over a year and a half on what it was that they needed, what it was that was important. And I connected with them. And I think Max connected with them. And I think Tom connected with them, because we were in our districts finding out what is it that you need to make your lives better, because that's what I think as a member of Congress I should be striving to do. And so we find all this information, we connect with our voters, we make a campaign, we flip these districts, and then we get down to Washington, and it's more of the same. It's, I have this piece of legislation I want to put forward, and I think it's going to make us look good and the Republicans look bad. Or the only thing I want to do
Who did that?
I'm not going to tell you who did that, but it just happened. But I want to put this forward because I think it'll show just how bad the Republicans are. Or we should do this because it'll show this. And I even said to the person I was talking to, I said, that's actually not my goal, because you know what? Making Republicans look bad doesn't actually advance the needs of the people in my district. And so when I say we need bipartisan legislation, I heard that gentleman because I understand that we can't have bipartisan legislation at any cost, right? I think a lot of us feel ill-used, for example, by Senator Mitch McConnell and some of what he's done, partisanship at any cost. And we don't want to be kind of rolled by that type of person. However, we just can't have these cycles where we get great legislation passed and then we spend the whole next cycle fighting over it. So we got the Affordable Care Act passed. Nobody thinks it's a great piece of legislation, right? It was a good start. It was what we had to do to start moving forward and start getting everyone covered. And then we spent the last 2 years, Republicans attacking it at every turn. And now we're going to get back in power, and we're going to start to try to get back what we've gained, what we had. But instead, wouldn't it be nice if we were actually now moving forward and fixing the problems with it?
So do you see Pelosi's performance in that, televised thing with Schumer and Trump yesterday, and Mike Pence, in that light, that she was going in there just to try to make Trump look bad, not to solve a problem, and that's part of what you were just describing?
No, certainly not. I was very proud of my party yesterday. I was very proud of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer for what they were able to do to stand strong on the things that this country needs. I'll tell you, throughout my campaign, I heard over and over again, we don't need a wall between the United States and Mexico. We need a tunnel into Manhattan. This administration... You
can hear the applause on both sides of the river.
Right. This administration already has $1.6 billion. They haven't spent yet. I believe in strong border security, but that involves drones, that involves technology, that involves border guards. That does not involve this ineffective wall. I think it's a waste of money, and I think we should be funding real infrastructure projects across this country. So that was not my issue. My issue is, as a whole, is this party, is the Democratic Party advancing the needs of people throughout this country?
But the same question I asked Max Rose is, does this mean Nancy Pelosi is too far left? Does it mean she's too partisan? A lot of media, at least, are reacting to yesterday's event as, aha, she just proved to a lot of people that she is extremely capable of leading the Democratic caucus and is a real leader.
I think there are different things that you need to do, and you need to do all things well if you're going to lead. And so, yes, you need to stand up for our values, for our institutions, for our people. You also need to make sure that as a party, we are advancing the needs of people throughout this country. And I want to see movement. on infrastructure, and I want to see movement on healthcare, and I want to get rid of the state and local tax deduction cap. Not everybody in the country agrees with me on that one.
And you don't think she's the best person among the Democrats in the House to move that forward?
I had, we were down in Washington for 2 weeks. We didn't talk about those things, except for when I was with the freshman members of Congress.
All right. We're going to take a 1-minute break, and then we're going to continue with these 3 incoming members of Congress from our area, Max Rose, Tom Malinowski, and Mikie Sherrill. Our next caller is going to be someone from Tom Malinowski's district in Berkeley Heights. And our phone number for others, 212-433-WNYC, 433-9692. And we'll take your questions in the green space here, too. Stay with us. Brian Lehrer on WNYC, live in the green space today. And when we're live in the green space, you can watch the show as well as listen at WNYC.org or the WNYC Facebook feed. Our first guest in the green space today, 3 incoming members of Congress, all fresh people. Is that what you say? What do you say, Michelle? What do you call yourself? I guess
maybe first years.
First years.
Plebes at the Naval Academy.
Plebes at the Naval Academy. Incoming, all who took seats that were previously held by Republicans from our area. Max Rose, who won in New York's 11th congressional district. That's all of Staten Island, plus a little of Brooklyn across the bridge. Mikie Sherrill in New Jersey's 11th congressional district, parts of Morris, Essex, Sussex, and Passaic counties. And Tom Malinowski in New Jersey's 7th district, parts of Hunterdon, Essex, Morris, Somerset, Union, and Warren counties. I think I got that all right. And let's take a call from Tom Malinowski's district. Peter in Berkeley Heights. You're on WNYC. Hello there.
Hi there. I'm glad to have you. Glad to be on, Brian. Thank you, Mr. Malinowski, and actually all of you. My concern is primarily with security of the vote. I mean, we hear lots of things about voter fraud and, basically unsupported allegations. But I'm looking at certain cases in Georgia, North Carolina, Florida, some in Wisconsin, Michigan, and even a few in New Jersey in history, I think, of allegations of disenfranchisement, suppression, vote security, and fraudulent acts for mail-in ballots, and the restoration of the rights of felons or former felons, people who have already served their sentence and should no longer have their rights. If you serve your time, you should actually have your citizens' rights restored. I'm curious to know if any of you have investigated ways of using your position in a federal government to secure and ensure the voting rights of the citizens at large and confidence in the results of elections.
Mr. Malinowski will give that to you first with your constituent.
Thank you, Peter. There are a couple of different issues here. One is the security of the ballot itself, and as you may know, New Jersey has one of the most antiquated and least secure voting systems in the country. We have these machines that we thought were really cool in 1978. They have, buttons and lights, and no wasteful paper comes out of them. And of course, we now know that that's what makes them hackable and insecure. Thank goodness we did not have that happen in the midterm elections, to our knowledge. The Congress last year rejected in a partisan vote a proposal to give more money to the states to upgrade their election infrastructure to protect against those sort of things. I think we're going to have a very different vote in the House of Representatives this year. More broadly, it's just amazing that there are some people in our politics who seem to think that the only way they can get their way is to have fewer people voting in America. And we're seeing in other states active measures to try to disenfranchise voters, making it, these signature requirements that if you registered to vote 30 or 40 years ago, and your signature, God forbid, has changed a little bit in that time, they reject your absentee ballot. Polling stations in African-American neighborhoods being told to close at earlier hours so that there are longer lines. These are very blatant things, and it's partly because the Supreme Court decided a few years ago that we've turned a corner in America and we no longer need the Voting Rights Act in parts of the country. One of our first acts in the House, H.R. 1, the first bill the Democrats are going to put forward after January 3rd, will be designed to address some of those problems. I'm going to be a very strong supporter of that effort.
Slate describes H.R. 1 as probably a one-house bill because Mitch McConnell wants nothing to do with it and can simply not bring it up in the Senate. Slate calls it the House Democrats' multi-purpose reform bill, which would include national automatic voter registration, limits to partisan gerrymandering, a restoration of the Voting Rights Act, campaign finance reform, and a tightening of congressional ethics. Mr. Malinowski, and the audience likes those, few people anyway, like those provisions. But if this is a bill that's going to be for show purposes because it only can get through the House, is it an example of what Ms. Sherrill was just talking about, where the priority, H.R. 1, is to do things that will make the Republicans look bad rather than get something accomplished?
I don't think there is a single thoughtful Republican in my congressional district who thinks it's a good idea to have dark money from other countries coming into America to influence our politics. Ethics reform, campaign finance reform is absolutely a bipartisan issue when it comes to the American people. If it isn't in the Congress, well, that's something that Leader McConnell in the Senate is going to have to explain. I think there are aspects of this bill, there are specific proposals that we may be able to pass, even in this divided Congress, by attaching pieces to other pieces of legislation. But at the end of the day, I think it is up to the Senate Republican leadership in particular to decide whether they're going to do something, work with us to do something that the vast majority of their supporters want the Congress to do or not. And if they don't, well, then yes, that becomes an issue in the next election, and I think that's totally appropriate to draw that contrast for the American people.
Ms. Sherrill, is H.R. 1 an example of what you were talking about?
Well, I certainly hope not. I certainly hope that we can get some of these great measures passed. In New Jersey, I'm very proud of the efforts we've had to expand voter access. In my own county, Essex County, the county clerk looked at the rules on the books and realized that he would be able to have some early voting at Turtleback Zoo on the weekend, which is so important for people that work, especially people that work in the city. I've mentioned we have some issues with New Jersey Transit getting back and forth. I encourage all my voters to vote before they leave for work. So, you know, this is a great movement forward. But certainly, you know, this is where I'd like to see, if this is going to be H.R. 1, I'd love to see H.R. 2 be an infrastructure project, H.R. 3 being expanding coverage for healthcare, H.R. 4 gun safety legislation. You know, I mean, I could go on, right, with real things that are going to help people. And, you know, so I just would love to see a broader look at how we're going to move forward.
And is there no H.R. 2, H.R. 3 projected yet? I don't know.
I've not seen them.
I think we're definitely going to have a push in the House that will, I think, be bipartisan to shore up the Affordable Health Act and to do something about prescription drug costs and health care costs. As you recall, after the effort to repeal the ACA failed last year, there were Republicans in the Senate who got together with Democrats to support provisions that would have shored up the existing system because it was the responsible thing to do. And the leadership in the House and Senate blocked any consideration of those measures. So we're gonna get to work on those as well.
And Mr. Rose, enthusiastic about H.R. 1? Or how I'm just being respectful to everybody. Once you're inaugurated, I'm going to call you Congressmember. But go ahead. How enthusiastic about H.R. 1 for the content and for it being H.R. 1 or announced by Nancy Pelosi in the way that it was?
I'm extraordinarily enthusiastic about H.R. 1 for a few reasons. First off, we all ran on it. We wrote a letter to the Democratic leadership demanding that this be the first issue in Congress. And as I talk about so much about changing politics in this country, part of the problem is that people run on stuff and then they don't do anything after they get elected. And this is our bold statement that this was not just some type of stunt. We meant what we're saying and we're doing it. But going back to this idea of bipartisanship and the Republicans, we are going to put a very, very simple choice in front of the Republicans. are you hypocrites or not? If you want to run on draining the swamp, if you want that to be your shtick, let's start doing it. Let's drain the swamp. Or are you in the pockets of special interests who have bought off politicians in Washington, D.C.? And if they make the decision that they care more about special interests than they do about their own voters who have demonstrated over and over and over again that they desperately want to see the swamp drained, then maybe the legislation won't be passed, or some of it, but they will certainly suffer consequences at the ballot box for that.
And
We're here.
And with Congress members-elect Max Rose, Tom Malinowski, and Mikie Sherrill from New York and New Jersey, respectively, let's take a question from here in the green space. Hello.
Good morning. I'm in the middle of reading Doris Kearns Goodwin's book, and
the one on leadership?
The one on leadership, and it really goes to show you, it breaks my heart that he's in the same house, Trump's in the same house as Lincoln. But the reason he's such a bad president is he's a very poor politician. Now, Nancy Pelosi, on the other hand, is a terrific politician with a terrific record. She passed the Affordable Care Act. She's been tremendous, and I know she's old. I'm old, too. You know, but us geezers have to get together. Questions. Two of you are going to have to make that vote, and you could either vote no or you can abstain. And to a certain extent, abstaining would mean that Nancy Pelosi needs fewer votes. If both of you were to abstain, then Nancy Pelosi, to get elected, would need fewer votes because you're elected by the whole House.
Do you mean a present vote? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, exactly. Okay. So I'd like you to comment on that. And the other thing I'd like to comment is Medicare for all. For the last 20 years, I've been in elected public office for 32 years. I'm retired now. But I'm also a volunteer tax preparer, and I speak to older, poor people frequently, and a lot of them are 63. They can't wait till they're 65. So Medicare for all. Medicare is very popular with them.
Did you say you were in elected office for 32 years?
Precisely.
Who are you? What did you hold?
I was in the Rockland County Legislature for 12, and the City Council suffered for the other.
Great. Thank you, sir. I'm not sure, Ms. Sherrill, that he's right about voting present or abstaining, making it easier for Pelosi to get elected Speaker. Doesn't she need the majority of the whole House, regardless whether you vote for another individual or abstain, or am I wrong about that? Do you know?
Yes. So it is, you need a majority of the people voting on the floor.
Who actually vote.
Who actually vote.
Okay, so he's right. Mm-hmm. And so his question is, do you plan to abstain or to vote for another individual?
So as I've mentioned, I've made a commitment to my district to not support Nancy Pelosi, so I won't be voting for her on the floor.
Which way?
Excuse me?
Which way? Meaning, will you abstain or will you vote for another individual?
I'll be voting,
I think that's his question.
Right, and I'll be voting for another individual on the floor.
And Max Rose?
Yeah, it's absolutely same here.
And let's see, I thought there was a follow-up in there.
Healthcare.
Oh, Medicare for all, right. Let's go down the road. Mr. Malinowski.
I am for, at this stage, giving every American the freedom to buy into a public option, a public system like Medicare. I think that's something that would work, that we can sell to the American people, because it would not force anybody to give up private health insurance, which is working for many, many Americans.
What would that cost? Why would that be an improvement? Would it cost a lot less to buy into Medicare than to buy a private insurance plan if you're 63 years old?
It could, and in fact, when the public option to the Affordable Care Act was first proposed, the Congressional Budget Office calculated that it would save the government money because it would create another competitive choice on the marketplace. We believe in the market in America. We believe in competition. Let's allow it. Let's allow more competition in our healthcare system.
Which is why you don't support the Bernie Sanders-style Medicare for all that would abolish all the private insurance in America?
I don't think it's realistic, especially where we are now, 2019, divided government, to say that we are going to abolish private health insurance in America. We have the system that we have, and we have to think of the difficulties of transforming it if we're really going to be serious about getting something done. I want action that's going to lower health care costs for people in my district. I want action that's going to get us to universal health care. And if it's not realistic, then I don't think it's the moral thing for me to do to put all of my eggs in that basket.
Mr. Rose, same question, Medicare for all?
No, look, I've been very clear on this, that what I am for is building on our existing system, certainly having a public option to allow people to always have choice. For more than a generation now, healthcare costs have been exceeding inflation. That's a tax on the working class and the middle class, and it's something that we have to very seriously address. But I don't think that means that we have to go to Medicare for all either. But what we do have to do is we do have to tell these hospital systems and these for-profit insurance companies that are constantly in this dramatic power asymmetry that they have between the consumer, that business as usual is no longer acceptable, and that government intervention in that regard has to happen. And there's plenty of examples for ways in which we can actually accomplish that. One thing I've spoken about is all-payer rate setting, which we've seen has dramatic success in Maryland. So again, we have got to lower these costs, and we have to establish universality. That does not mean, though, completely upending our existing system, and particularly telling many union members who have fought for their health care bills that those times are changing.
All-payer rate system, does that mean everybody buying an insurance plan pays the same rate regardless of age or health?
No. What that means is that there is a government role for making sure that there is a sensible pricing mechanism in our healthcare system. Because right now, the system's ridden with perverse incentives. Hospitals get paid more to fill beds. We do not have an emphasis on achieving health at all. We don't have one, and it's got to change.
And Ms. Sherrill, Medicare for all?
So no, I have not been a proponent of Medicare for all, because the price tag I've seen for that is $32 trillion, which quite frankly, in my district where we've seen taxes rising consistently year after year after year, it's making it harder and harder for middle class people to afford the cost of living. I can't sign on to that. Now, if we come up with a plan to show very particularly how we're going to lower costs, I'm very interested in that. Right now, what I'd like to see in this next Congress is how we get universal health care, how we make sure everyone gets covered. In New Jersey, we brought the mandate back. We're one of the few states that is actually driving down healthcare costs right now. I'm not sure that we are going to be able to get back the mandate in this Congress, but I do think that's key. And looking at other ways we can continue to improve upon the Affordable Care Act.
Bernie Sanders says the economics would work out because the tax hike on individuals would work out to less than what most people pay in premiums and deductibles and everything today.
I don't like things are going to work out. I like plans. So I want to see how that's going to work out. I'm not saying it won't. I just want to very particularly see something that's going to show me in a detailed fashion how we're going to drive costs down for consumers.
All right. Another question here in the green space. We have one on this side here or no? Over there. Oh, back there? Okay. Sorry. Hi.
Hi. I've been a canvasser for Mikie Sherrill, and I was thrilled to see her here today. So it's a big surprise for me. My question is about climate change. That is one of the most important things, as far as I'm concerned, that needs to be addressed. In New Jersey, we have pipelines that are traversing our state. We have a rollback in pollution standards now. And we have a number of power plants proposed for our state, one of which is in the Meadowlands, which will actually not benefit New Jersey at all, but benefit New York. So I'd like to just hear what our representatives would like to do and what their priorities are for climate change.
Ms. Sherrill, to your constituent.
Thank you. I think that's a great question. We in New Jersey have such wonderful opportunities to be a real leader in this space. We have the best offshore wind conditions for wind power energy in the world. We see the prices of wind power coming down. We already have 600 jobs in solar in the 11th district. We've seen some of the tariff wars and trade wars affecting our ability to grow that, but we want to grow that area. I know our governor wants to move forward with RGGI, the consortium looking into green power in the Northeast. He wants to see a green power economy. So what I would like to do now is see the plan, because you can't move to you can't move to a green power economy on a dime, and we want to make sure, what are the calculations? Are we going to continue to subsidize nuclear for the near future so people don't move back to fossil fuels? How soon can we get a green power economy up and running? What are we going to have to do to our power grid? We should be moving forward on this. We should be leading the nation on this, but we need a comprehensive plan, and I'd like to see us moving forward on that quickly.
Mr. Malinowski?
Some of you may have seen a couple of days ago the administration's negotiators at the climate conference in Poland lined up with Saudi Arabia and Russia against the rest of the world to refuse to even welcome the report by scientists that the Earth is warming and that we're heading to a catastrophe in a dozen or so years. It was embarrassing to me as a former diplomat and as an American. My heart goes out to the career professionals who are forced to take that position alongside countries that do not share our values and our interests. I think, look, we have, again, a fragile foothold in the House of Representatives. We still have this president and the Senate that we have. I would like comprehensive action on something like a climate tax, which is what most economists believe we need to meet our commitments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I don't think we're going to get that in the next 2 years. But we can certainly exercise checks and balances to make sure that the EPA enforces the laws that are on the books, that we don't see further rollbacks in environmental regulations, that Congress has a role to play in that process, that we protect the scientists that are working for the government and for the EPA so that they can use the word climate change.
Let me jump in.
We can keep things from getting worse for 2 years while hopefully the states like New Jersey lead the way forward.
For time, we're almost out of time. When you mention a carbon tax, do you think there's a lesson for America in the Yellow Vests revolt taking place in France right now, the last straw trigger for which was this gasoline tax increase for the sake of the climate?
Well, I think a carbon tax, if we ever get there, would work very differently because it would be rebated to the people who are paying it. It's simply a way of using market incentives to encourage the private sector to move in the direction together, companies working together in the direction of clean energy. The alternative to that is what Republicans like even less, and that's heavy-handed regulation from Washington and from state governments. But one or the other, those are the choices we have. It's, as President Obama said, it's chicken or fish. There is not another option on the menu other than a global catastrophe that's going to ruin the American economy. China understands this. They're investing hundreds of billions of dollars in clean energy research. It's not because the Chinese Communist Party loves trees. It's because they want to win the future. Do we want to win the future? I say yes.
Max Rose, same. Chicken, fish, or the vegan alternative?
Plain and simple, as someone who has put on our nation's uniform, climate change is the greatest national security threat that we face as a country. And I'm tired of looking young people in the eye and telling them as a consequence of the incredibly short-termist thinking of our nation's politicians that they will have to suffer incredible consequences a generation from now. There's a few points that I think that we are often not acknowledging when it comes to this. One is that we need an Apollo project of the 21st century for battery technology so that we can actually develop a system that can retain energy over the long term so we can truly transition ourselves to a carbon-free economy. The second is that going back to the corrosive nature of money in our politics. If we think that we are going to arrive at any sensible solution about this and have people at the table who have been bought off by the fossil fuel industry, we are out of our damn mind. And we have got to fix that. We have to make sure that the right people are at the table who can actually fix this problem over the long term. And I have all the faith in the world that that's going to happen.
We have a minute left, just a minute. Anybody, do any of you want to just kind of say a 15-second, okay, here we go. I'm ready to dive in to the ocean on January 1st. Just say a last whatever to your constituents and the people of the greater New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area or America? Here we go. And what, Max Rose?
Look, orientation was a series of cocktail parties. If I have to eat another mini crab cake, I'm going to jump off the Verrazano Bridge. And so I'm gaining another form of a freshman 15. So I got to think about how we're going to do our workout routine. Mikey and I are going to start a running regimen. I'm looking forward to that.
Mikie Sherrill?
I'm really excited about my remedial PT with Max Rose. That's going to be great. I'm in great shape after a long campaign. But I have to say that what's really exciting to me, you've heard it here. The freshman class, I think, is dynamic. I think brings an incredible amount to the table. My favorite story, a woman came in to give us some training, and she'd been in politics for a very long time and said, something just happened to me that's never happened to me before. I was just mistaken for a member of Congress. So that's the new Congress we're going into, and it's going to be, I'm really very excited to work with everyone and get some stuff accomplished for the district.
And Tom Malinowski.
I met a lot of people in the last year who were feeling incredibly powerless in the face of what's happening in Washington. And I think the wonderful thing about this election is that it's renewed our sense that as citizens we have power. It's not going to be easy. We all know that. We're realistic. But this was a triumph, this election, for civic society, for democracy in America. It should restore our hope that if we work really, really hard, we can make this country better. And I think if we keep it up for a couple of years, we're actually going to be a stronger democracy than we were before Donald Trump.
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank incoming members of Congress from New York and New Jersey, Max Rose, Tom Malinowski, Mikie Sherrill. Thank you all so much for coming to the Green Space.
Thanks so much.
Honor to have you here during the transition.